I will try to share it, and which are being leveraged within our products. So moving on to SOA, and first of all, if you are very new to the service-oriented architecture, I would recommend you to go just definitely read one of the great authors called Thomas Earl. There are 2 books are there. One is called Service-Oriented Architecture Concepts, Technology and Design. The other one is SOA, Principles of Service Design. I just now showed you both these 2 books. So if you are a novice to service-oriented architecture, I would highly recommend you to read these 2 books. They have explained the concept pretty well. Again, when the concept has been explained, they explained it pretty well in terms of vendor neutral and technology neutral, keeping in the focus. It's a concept that can be applied to any technology. It can be Java, it can be C++, it can be .NET, so any technology. Moving on, in SOA, there are 2. Just I wanted to quickly touch base. In case of service-oriented architecture, the first thing comes called a service. What is service? Service is nothing but a collection of capabilities. Whenever any service it has 2 parts. One is a contract, other one is a logic. The contract is nothing but the interface what you expose to the outside world. This is very interesting. I wanted to just say the service is called a service-oriented if service-oriented architecture design principles are applied to a meaningful extent. The reason I'm trying to say the meaningful extent is because whenever you have any architecture design principles, you will always have a conflicting always priorities. Which one should be applied what? So that is an architect responsibility, that it should be applied to the meaningful extent as per the business needs, because always a trade-off is required whenever you are trying to apply any principle. You can be always apply 100% purity, but if you do not meet the business needs, so then the architecture is no use. So what I'm trying to say is that apply the principle to a meaningful extent, which will give you both the business benefit and also the architecture benefit. So moving on, what are those design principles? The service-oriented architecture has 7 design principles. Again, there are too many authors have written too many about many things. What the Thomas Earl has done is basically he's tried to focus on the vendor neutral and the technology neutral, and he's came up with these 7 principles. The 7 principles basically are, I have listed down, basically a standardized service contract. This principle is one of the fundamental principles of service orientation. Just look at it. If you are developing a product, you expose multiple services to provide relevant information. Taking an example of employee services. Now when you expose employee services, you do have an employee ID. Now if you have an employee ID, the same data type and the structure across various services, because this employee ID may be referred in multiple services when you are in your system. So when you have it in multiple services, what it's trying to say is that standardize the contract. Wherever you use the employee ID, use the same data type, same data structure, same data validation. That's what it's trying to say. So what is the advantage of having this one? This reduces the need of data transformation. Let's say in some places if you expose the contract as string, and in some places you expose the data as numeric, then what you will end up in doing is you need to do a transformation of the data. So what the principle is trying to say is that by applying a standardized service contract, you reduce the data transformation. Moving on to the loop coupling. So again, this is a pretty industry well known. Like even when you come across from the object-oriented principles, you do know that all the classes, whenever that one class needs to interact with another class, they should be loosely coupled. So just to again highlight one thing is the service-oriented architecture is nothing new. It is made up of the best practices of procedural-oriented languages and the object-oriented design languages, object-oriented analysis and design. So it's a combination of the best of breed across whatever we follow the traditional, and those best of breed has been basically classified into 7 design principles, 8 design principles which have been listed here. When you look at coupling, there are various types of coupling. Basically, when you look from the service-oriented architecture perspective, there are 2 things are there. One is a service consumer, service provider, and the service which basically what it's exposing through a contract, and the other one is a logic. So you at any point of in time, contract should not be dependent on logic. Logic can be dependent on the contract. So there are various types of couplings exist, and always you should have always a negative. You should not have a negative coupling. You should always have a positive coupling. It means loosely coupled. Moving across quickly to abstraction. The main goal of this principle is to keep the details of the quantity and the detail of contract pretty concise and balanced, and prevent unnecessary access to additional service details. So that will ensure a good level of abstraction. Moving on to reusability, any service which is highly agnostic or basically reusable is called service reusability. So when I say agnostic means basically it does not depend on too many parameters. It's completely the context agnostic. So that's what is called as service reusability. So coming back to the service autonomy, it is any service which has a high level of control over its resource. That's called as that is called as service. The service is autonomous. When I'm trying to say it has a high level of control, let's say if there are incoming number of requests is more than 10 or 100 or 500. So automatically the service should be able to handle all the incoming number of requests. Even though there's an increase in the load, it should be able to increase the resource capacity automatically. So that's called as service autonomy. Statelessness means just basically a service should be stateless, so that make the service as much as stateless, so that it is basically it does not occupy too many memory resources. Composability means the one service should be able to call another service, and the discoverability is pretty much what I'm trying to say is that you should expose the metadata information which will help the service can be quickly identified for which business purpose. So these are the key 7 fundamental principles of service orientation. If you want, again, there's an exclusive 1 hour session can be conducted exclusively to